Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. How we doing? It's me, Legal Vices, and we are here on another Maritime Monday. We we skipped Maritime Monday last week because of all the craziness going on around this Zachariah Anderson trial that I'm doing. But today I just couldn't. I couldn't wait any longer. We couldn't skip another Maritime Monday because it's just too much fun, and there's too much to talk about. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be doing another Maritime Monday, but today is a little different, a little special, a little different. And why is that, you might ask? Because again, today we have fairly limited time. We got about 90 minutes. But why this is a special day is if you recall a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, we did the Batavia incident, which was the first Europeans to set foot on Australian soil. Lots of weird, crazy stuff that happened there. We learned a lot about shipping back in the 1600s, and all kinds of bad things happened there. But you remember that video we watched was it was a presentation. It was a lecture given by a man named Jeffrey. He's a Australian. He's a Geoff, as I call them, Geoff. He and his wife were retired. It was the Retired Afloat is their YouTube channel, and we got about 300 viewers or so. That was really nice of you guys to do that. But I said I wanted to get in touch with the guy, and I did. I got in touch with him. We're in email contact now, and he said he definitely wants to be part of one of the Maritime Monday shows. So we're trying to work it out. We're trying to set a schedule because he's doing cruise ship tours and things like that, and he lectures on cruise ships. So we are trying to get this to happen. So we'll be happy to have him on when we can. And what I want to do with him is I want to do this story. I want to do the story of the Northwest Passage. This is just kind of a tantalizer. This is like an aperitif. This is like a little appetizer for a longer, more fleshed out, so to speak, cannibalism joke there somewhere, a more fleshed out version of the story. So this is just a little bite. This is a little sampler. This is just kind of give you an overall picture. And then when we can work out the schedule, we'll get into some deeper discussion of the Shackleton expedition. I said that because I have my bottle of Shackleton right here and my Shackleton cup. They don't they don't have a Northwest Passage Franklin expedition whiskey, unfortunately, even though they did take a lot of whiskey with them, but we'll be talking about that later. So that's going to be great. That's what we're doing. We're going to be giving you the big overview today, and then later, at some point, hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be able to do a much deeper dive into this subject with an expert on the subject. All right, and so just to finish up here with some of the housekeeping stuff before we jump straight into the story today, we have our like and subscribe poll up. If you haven't already done that, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and then take our little poll. Because that's what we like. We like our little polls here. Today's lame poll is, I smashed the like and subscribe button like a ship crushed by the Arctic ice. I smashed the like and subscribe button like a cannibal tenderizing meat. We'll be talking about that later. And I smashed the like and subscribe button like a normal person because your polls suck. 16% of you have already voted for your polls suck. Oh well, whatever. It's the best I can do. I need an official poll writer. All right. Mods, thank you for being here. Flux, I saw Flux here in chat. You're supposed to be vacationing, Flux. But I'm so glad that you could still be here, even though you're supposed to be vacationing. Right. Okay, I'm just kind of scrolling down here, checking all your chats here. You're giving me the countdown because I said 30 seconds. See, I kept my word. Okay, I think that's it. Not a whole lot of background stuff to talk about today, other than the fact that when this ends, we'll go into the Zachariah Anderson murder trial day. Gosh, what is this? 13, 14, something like that. I forget. I think I even scheduled it wrong. Whatever. I'll worry about it later. I'll fix everything somehow if I have. I don't even know. But yeah, so today we want to talk about the fabled search for the Northwest Passage. And Flux is actually on the airplane. Hey, Flux. Flux is on the plane. There we go. Well, welcome. Now let's start. Let's just start showing videos of plane crashes and talking about horrible air disasters, just because Flux is on an airplane right now. All right. So to do this, to talk about this lost Franklin expedition, this doomed Franklin expedition, we can't start here. The story cannot begin with this story. We have to back up and do a little backstory on this. And so while we're doing that, just to be aware that I'll try to pay as much attention as possible to the chat, and we'll be answering questions as we can, as we take natural pauses during the story. But today, as has been done before, Maritime Horrors is the channel that we're borrowing this particular video from. Make sure you go to the Maritime Horror and subscribe to his channel, and to like all of the videos, especially like this one. Leave a little comment, tell him that we sent you, whatever it is. Just let him know we're here, and he's been quite awesome because I haven't had a copyright strike from him yet. I hope he takes it in the same way that Brick and Mortar and the retired afloat people do, and we can continue doing it that way. So that's the channel. It's Maritime Horrors, and this video is prominently displayed there. Super chats, of course, will always get read. There's no minimum requirement to speak to me. They're not expected, but they're gratefully and graciously accepted. You parting with any amount of your hard-earned money at least deserves me making a special effort to comment, answer, respond to everything that is sent my way by super chats. Super stickers, you can also do those. For you replay crew, they have these super thanks things that down there you can click on if you want to. If you feel cheated that you can't super chat because you're watching it on the replay crew. Oh, yes, you can. All right, that's out of the way. Grift is done. We'll check back on the like and subscribe poll in about an hour. Currently, there's 279 of you here. Again, as we always know, these Maritime Mondays are small but intimate gatherings. All right. So if we can't start the story of the Lost Franklin expedition, where do we start the story of the Lost Franklin expedition? Well, we start the story of the Lost Franklin expedition by going to a previous Franklin expedition. A previous Franklin expedition searching for the Northwest Passage. The Lost Franklin expedition wasn't the first time he tried to do it. It was, in fact, the third time he had tried for the Northwest Passage. Now, to bring up this story, to sort of give literally a background to this story, we need to bring up a little bit of background here. This here, let me scooch out of the way. All right, this will play prominently into our story here. This particular piece of artwork. So check that out. Check that piece of artwork out. This plays into the story. We'll get rid of it here in a minute. I promise when we finish the story. Okay, this story takes place in the times before. As we said, this was the Lost expedition. The Lost Franklin expedition was the third expedition. Well, this expedition was followed. This is called the Copper Mine River, the Copper Mine expedition, they call this one. This was, again, part of this wide British attempt. The British government was spending an enormous amount of money to try to find this fabled Northwest Passage, which was to go from eastern Canada to western Canada through the Arctic Sea. The purpose for that was so that we could do this without having to. We could send goods from England to the Orient without having to go all the way down around South America or all the way down around Africa and back up the other way. We could just cut across, which would save months and months at sea. You would cut off about 6,000 miles from the journey. And so this, and whoever found this passage and got to map it and keep it on their maps would benefit enormously from this financially. And so the British invested a huge amount of time, effort, money, and unfortunately, as we're about to see, lives into finding this Northwest Passage. Okay, this landscape here behind me, this is a painting that's called The View of the Arctic Sea from the Mouth of the Copper Mine River, Midnight, July, 1821. And it was painted by a midshipman, George Back. And it appears a little pretty idyllic back here. The little dinner campfire thing going on here. It's midnight, so they're way up there and where it doesn't really get dark in the summer. And you got the Union Jacks flying there in the background. But this wasn't easy. This wasn't easy to get even where they are in this picture. They suffered a lot to get to this point where they could paint this picture, and things just got worse from there. And as they're saying in chat, it's like Cape Fear. There's Cape Hope, Cape Fear, like all of these all of these really ominous sounding names for the way around the tip of Africa or the tip of South America. Anywho, so this expedition being part of the greater search for the Northwest Passage, there was traders from the Hudson Bay Company and the Northwest Company. And there were native tribal guides and Inuit guides, and then there's the French Canadian like porters. They were just basically like Sherpas. They were French Canadian Sherpas, mules basically. They were called voyageurs, and they were all expected to provide assistance along this route for the Coppermine River expedition. So it started on the shores of the Hudson Bay in 1819, and it took nearly a year for these guys to travel 1,700 miles. I mean, we can do that in almost no time at all now. But it took them nearly a year to travel 1,700 miles to a lake called the Great Slave Lake. They were hampered by exceptional cold. There was food supply problems. There was an ongoing dispute between these two fur companies, the Hudson Bay Company and the Northwest Company. They were all having their little infighting things and whatnot. And the winter, they left, like I said, in August 1819. Then they got there. The winter of 1820 to 1821 was spent in this encampment of Fort Enterprise on the banks of the Coppermine River, where the British were partly hunkered down alongside the argumentative voyeurs and a group of hunters from the local Yellowknife tribe. Now, the daughter of one of the hunters, she was a beautiful little 16-year-old girl nicknamed Greenstockings. She inflamed the passions of both the artist of this picture here, George Back, and a fellow midshipman and artist, Robert Hood, to the point where a duel with pistols was narrowly avoided. They were going to get into a duel over this lovely Yellowknife tribe girl. Now, we're going to hear about Robert Hood a little more in just a second. So by June 1821, so it's been 2 years since they left the Hudson Bay area. They've gone 1,700 miles in 2 years. This is the one of the other Franklin expeditions, not the main one we're talking about tonight. So by June 1821, nearly 2 years after they set out, the weather had finally gotten good enough for Franklin and his men to head off up the Coppermine River. And on reaching the sea, they set up the camp shown in this illustration back here, and the Yellowknives headed back to their homes. And they left the party, which was Franklin, Back, Hood, and a Dr. Richardson and an ordinary seaman by the name of Hepburn, plus 15 of these voyageurs, these porters, these French Canadian porters. Now, they set out to sea in 3 canoes. And they were heading eastward, and they managed to map over 500 miles of uncharted coastline. So they're doing really, really good in their efforts to map out what could possibly be the Northwest Passage. 500 miles of coastline was quite an accomplishment. Now, the plan was then to retrace their route to the mouth of the Coppermine and reach Fort Enterprise before the Canadian winter set in again. Unfortunately, as so often happens in these Maritime Monday stories, rough seas prevented this from happening. And Franklin realized that his men were now facing an arduous journey back across land. The sea was no longer an option. It's cold. It's rough. And the place where they had to cross by land was unfortunately called the Barren Lands. And they're called the Barren Lands for a very, very good reason. They're barren. Now, Franklin, he wrote a book about this. He didn't write the book. It was essentially just like he wrote his story. And it was actually a bestseller, the story of this particular expedition. And you can kind of get a little bit of understanding of what this march across the barren lands was just by looking at some of the phrases from Franklin's own account of the story. He said, "We were all detained all that day by a strong southerly wind and were much incommoded in the tents by the drift snow. Our blankets did not suffice to keep us in tolerable warmth, the slightest breeze seeming to penetrate through our debilitating frames. We perceived our strength to decline every day, and every exertion began to be irksome. After our usual supper of singed skin and bone soup, even these scraps, salvaged from half-eaten carcasses along the route, proved elusive, and the travelers were reduced to a diet of tripe de roche, which was an acrid lichen that caused severe diarrhea, in case you were wondering. And famously, they would supplement this diet of severe diarrhea causing lichen with scraps of leather from their own boots. Yeah, that's how hungry they were. They were scraping diarrhea causing lichen off of rocks and eating them with like strips of boiled boot leather. Well, finally, they survived through all of this and they reached Fort Enterprise on 12th October 1821. They were expecting like a great support team there. The Yellowknife Indians were supposed to be there. There were supposed to be other people to help them. There was supposed to be a huge supply of meat supplies, dried meats, and things like that. Well, they got back there to Fort Enterprise. Winter is almost getting ready to set in. Like I said, it's 12th of October, and they are way freaking far north in Canada. They got to this Fort Enterprise, and it was empty. Absolutely empty. None of the promised dried meats were there. The Yellowknives weren't there. Now, way back at the very tail end of the straggling expedition, people were still coming in. Hood and Richardson, they were too weak to continue. And they made a camp with this other guy, Hepburn, we talked about a minute ago as well. And a voyager named, oh, God, hell, what was it? It was Michel. I can't think of his last name. Crap. I just have Michel down here. Started with a T, but that's completely irrelevant. Yeah, not Patricia, not Fort Enterprise, a Fort Enterprise. So anyway, the Voyager named Michel. So there was Hood, that the guy that was out there, and then there was Richardson and this Hepburn and the Voyager Michel. Now there was 3 other Voyagers in Michel's party. So there was 4 of these porters, these Voyagers. And they would go out hunting for anything that they could eat, anything, because they're starving to death. Well, Michel took out one of the Voyagers with him, one of the other Voyagers with him, and 2 went out and one of them came back. Apparently, there was a tragic accident involving Michel's buddy, the other Voyageur. So yeah, two went out. Michael came back, but never fear, although his friend and fellow Voyager died of a terrible accident while they were hunting, Michel managed to bring back a very, very large supply of some freshly butchered wolf meat. So, woo, that was lucky, wasn't it? Yeah. So that saved the day, even though he lost a friend. They did find some wolves, and they managed to get some fresh wolf meat out of it. Then there was another expedition went out there, and well, the remaining 2 people apparently they got separated while they were hunting or something, and the other guys didn't come back. The other guy didn't come back. Only Michel came back again with some more wolf meat, luckily. Mm-hmm. So there was 4 of these Voyagers, and 3 of them just mysteriously disappeared. But again, it was very, very lucky because Michel was able to get the wolf meat, and that would sustain them for a little while longer. Well, as you can possibly imagine, uh, the other two guys, Hood and Richardson, they kind of started to get a little bit suspicious that when people would sadly disappear, this would coincide with Michelle's suddenly presenting them with copious amounts of wolf meat from a secret location in the woods. And then Michelle and Hood, they got in an argument. They went. Michelle and Hood, they went out to do some more hunting apparently, or they were getting ready to, or something. And Richardson, he was outside in the camp doing something, and then he hears a gunshot from inside the camp. So last he knew, Michelle and Hood were arguing. He hears a gunshot. He rushes back into the camp and finds Hood laying dead. Well, Michelle explained that it was an accident. Hood was cleaning his gun and it accidentally discharged. Well, this was clearly impossible because the barrel of the gun was far too long for him to have been looking down it and pull the trigger. Oh yeah, and also the bullet went into the back of his head. So that can be kind of a problem. So Richardson then goes, I knew it. Michelle is a murderer, and we've been cannibals. So after bringing this up with the other guy, Hepburn, they decided to wait for the right moment. They eventually found the right moment, and Richardson shot Michael in the head with a pistol and killed him. So, well, this wolf meat, apparently that gave Richard and Hepburn the strength to press on to Fort Enterprise. And when they got to Fort Enterprise, they found Franklin there and the advanced party nearly starving to death. So Franklin is dying. The other people that were there in that advanced party were dying because all of the stuff, the supplies that were supposed to be there weren't there. And he described them as having ghastly countenances with dilated eyeballs and sepulchral voices of Captain Franklin, and those who were with him were more than we could bear at first. So then more of these voyagers were about to die of hunger. On 7th of November of 1821, they were finally rescued. Relief arrived in the form of a party of Yellowknives bearing food. And after they were nursed back to health, the British party began the long march home. They reached Hudson Bay Company headquarters at the York factory in July of 1822. 3 years to go there and back again. So, well, back home, fame and fortune followed for Franklin. A murder inquiry was held into the death of Michelle. Meanwhile, the murder trial was quietly dropped, and the expedition's failure to map more than 500 miles of Canada's Arctic coast was lost in tales of courage and in the face of extreme adversity. And as I said, Franklin wrote a book called The Narrative, and it was immediately a bestseller in 1823. And it's still available in print in places if you want to read that. It's called Narrative. So that is the background. that is about Patricia asks, what about the other passage ship that poisoned themselves? We're not even to the Lost Expedition yet. This is the prelude to the story we're going to be talking about today. So that was just as if you will, that was an appetizer. That was an appetizer for today's story. So anywho, that brings us to today's story. Ooh, so if you're following along at home, Franklin he's been on 2 expeditions to try to map out some of the coastline to find this Northwest Passage. And then in this expedition we just talked about, the copper mine expedition, he damn near died there. It almost cost him his life. It cost him the life of, I believe it was 11 of the people that were with him. 11 of, I can't remember, like 29 or something people, but a bunch of the people that went with him on that trip didn't make it, and there was even cannibalism. So that's just the first story. So he goes back to England, becomes famous and whatnot, but then his reputation starts to sour a little bit. And then the stories of cannibalism come up, and the fact that he's failed on 2 previous expeditions to really do much of anything. And so his reputation started to get a little bit tarnished. And that leads us to today's story of the lost Franklin expedition. But before we do that, you've been also enthralled, and we have to get to Farmhand Tom's big, major, super. Thank you very much for the $50 super chat. Law Cards is live. DM'd you the link on Twitter if you have time to mention it. I do have time to mention it. This is actually kind of fun. There we go. This is this is actually quite fun. And this is something you can do. And again, for those of you that freaked out when I mentioned Ricado's fundraiser thing, and everybody's filling my chat with, you can do that. Nope, same thing I said there. I'm going to say here, if you want to participate in this really, really fun thing, you can. If not, don't. It's not for everybody, but it might be for some, and it's actually quite fun. Let me just show you what we're talking about here. All right. This is something that Farmhand Tom, and if you've seen, Farmhand Tom does some funny videos. He does some of the mashup videos, some of the AI videos. And let's see. This is a new project. Let's get rid of this. This is Law Cards. It's a Kickstarter called Law Cards. What it is LawTube and LawTube adjacent collecting cards. How cool is this? we've got this handsome son of a bitch right here. And it's got all of our friends: Steve Gosney, Andrew Bronca, Nick Ricada. We've got Steph the Ultra Nerd. Flux is featured in there, and a bunch of other people. And they're these various packs. There's 5 cards to a pack, and you can get 1 pack for 10. There's 2 packs for 20, 5 packs for 50. You can buy these mega packs. You get all of these things. There's going to be some random hand signed cards by people. Here we got where we got here? Andrew Bronca, Joe Good Logic, surprise auto from another law streamer. But there's a big, and they're on, basically they're going to be on the same kind of cards that, like the Pokemon card and other top class like baseball and basketball cards and football cards are on. You get these card relics and things. That's it. If you want to go check this out with Tom Sailors, or just search for Law Cards and see if it's something you want to do. It'll be fun. Like I said, we'll be doing. We got Steve's sidecar recipe. I've got some stuff to do. We'll be doing some. I'll be signing some cards that get randomly stuck in the packages and whatnot. And if this is a thing that you might be interested, if you are, cool. If not, hey, don't worry about it. But I think it's going to be kind of fun. So check it out. Yeah, hockey cards, whatever you want to call them. Who else judging Jeff's bookmarks? What are my bookmarks? Naver, Firefox, Naver, Daum, Google, TV shows, Facebook. Yeah, there's nothing really there to judge. All right, so that's the deal. Oh yeah, there's like on the back, if I recall correctly, there's going to be like sayings, some quotes from people, some stats, things like that. Just it's all in fun. It's all gonna be kind of crazy. I think it's gonna be great. Yeah, law cards on Kickstarter.com. Check it out. Thank you so much for that super chat. Tom is a great guy. Farmhand Tom is a really, really funny, good guy. Will there be a beardless Lorax card? No. I don't even know what cards of mine will be available. That's how exciting this is. At this point, I don't know what my cards will be. It's just silliness. It's just fun. Go check it out. All the details are there. Now let's get back on with our show here. Again, see, that's what super chats do. Super chats get you a big thing read. Barbie's World, I don't know. All right, today's adventure. We've got this. This is what Farmhand Tom says. Thank you, Jeff. Oh, you are absolutely welcome, because I think this is a really, really creative idea. I think it's really cool. And there we go. So on with the story, on with today's adventure. I guess now would be a good time. Let's just get our midstream grift out of the way. 508 concurrent viewers. You know what? I'm sorry to keep delaying getting into the main part of the story, but I just wanted to say that this Maritime Monday thing in the past month or so has really, really surprised me. We're usually averaging 100, 150 viewers for the entire time we've been doing this until about a month ago. And then something seems to have clicked, and now we're up to 500 people. This is either number one or number two of the most viewers we've had for this story, for this Maritime Monday corner we do. And I'm so glad you're here to enjoy it with me. I deeply appreciate the interest people are showing. It's fantastic. And again, for those of you that know the story, this just happened because I had nothing to talk about one day. And I thought, well, I can talk about ship collisions and who's right and who's wrong and what went wrong. And I threw those up and you were all interested. So it started us down this road of telling tales of maritime adventures and misadventures. Oh, man. So, gosh, I'm actually really quite touched by this. So I appreciate that. And so that's it. 526 of you, 360 likes. Take the like and subscribe poll. Oh, and by the way, again, the ADHD has me by the throat right now. I've gotten several emails, tweets, and DMs over the weekend saying that people wake up and they realize they were unsubscribed from my channel. It happens. We talk about it quite a bit. YouTube just randomly unsubscribes people for some reason, and it's happening again. So please, if you are already subscribed, just double check to make sure you're still subscribed. And if you haven't, I would deeply, deeply appreciate your subscription as we race towards 36,000 subscribers. Currently, we are sitting at, what does Mr. Phone say? Mr. Phone says we are sitting at 35,812. We need like 188 more. 188 more people to get to 36,000. So that'd be great. If you haven't subscribed, I would be deeply, deeply honored if you would consider doing so. Let's get these couple super chats out of the way, and then I swear to God, we'll get into the story of the lost Shackleton expedition. Annie L says, you're an excellent storyteller. Well, thank you very much, Annie. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I just think I talk a lot, but hey, that's the whole point of being on YouTube, isn't it? Talking a lot. And Laura Waldy, thank you for covering Franklin. The story is one of my favorite topics in Canadian history. I love Maritime Monday. Well, great. I hope you'll enjoy the short version today, and even more when we get our special guest to give us a insight, in a very, very, very deeper insight into the story over the space of a couple of hours. That'll be fun. I can't wait till we get that lined up. All right. All right, we got all that stuff out of the way. Apologies there for the side we just totally went sideways on that. I apologize for that. I have a problem staying focused. All right, we've laid the background. We know there's at least one expedition that Sir John Franklin has been on that ended up with his near death, the death of a bunch of his the people in his care, and cannibalism. So let's look at today. We're going to bring this up. I swear. See, I told you I kept my promise. And we're only going to stop at 845 times like we always do. And again, one more time, Maritime Horrors is the channel here. And how am I having some, God, I watched this like 8 times and I haven't liked it yet. See, that's why you have to be told to like videos. Even I have to be told to like videos. So there we go. Lost Franklin Expedition on Maritime Horrors. Subscribe to his channel, like his videos, and sit back and enjoy this tale.
The year is 1845. The corners of the globe are...
So this is 23 years after the other expedition. 23 years after the cannibalism and near death for Franklin expedition.
All but filled in. Great strides have been made in the field of global exploration in the last few hundred years. But one final monolithic effort is all that remains. One last 1,000-mile stretch of coastline remained in the Canadian Arctic, the Holy Grail, the Northwest Passage. But this milestone would not go easily, and would become the grave of numerous British sailors. The mythic Northwest Passage, a route deeply sought after by the British Admiralty.
See, this is ish what they were hoping to accomplish, so that you don't have to go all the way down around Africa to get where you want to go, or all the way down around South America to get where you want to go. The projected path was thought to lie somewhere around here.
Route from the Atlantic to the Pacific through the Canadian Arctic. Finding such a route would mean no longer sailing far south around Cape Horn to reach the Pacific. Theoretically, a route from England to China could be made, making trade far more profitable. The link was of the utmost importance to the Admiralty, who, through the early 1800s, launched numerous expeditions both by land and sea to attempt to map a route, meeting with varying levels of success, but hadn't quite found the missing link. The uncharted area of the Arctic was down to 180,000 square kilometers, or 70,000 square miles. They planned for one final expedition, a route west through Lancaster Sound, then south and west through a distance of around 1,670 kilometers, or 1,040 miles. A journey that...
Yeah, and so this would save 6,000 miles, as I mentioned at the beginning, which would be many, many months at sea.
That would be none too easy, but would surely spell fame and glory to whomever completed it. But to whom would go the honor? It wouldn't be a light decision for the Admiralty to make. Sir John Barrow was the second secretary to the Admiralty, and the man in charge of raising the expedition. At 82 years old, the man was keen on seeing the passage forced as a final achievement in his career. So who to lead it? The first man pegged for the job was famous Arctic explorer Sir William Edward Parry. Parry, a Welsh-English captain born in 1790 in Bath, Somerset, England, was the man who set the record in 1827 as the farthest north traveled, reaching 82 degrees 45 minutes north, a record that wouldn't be beaten until 1875, nearly 50 years later. He completed 4 expeditions in his time of service to the Royal Navy, from 1803 to 1855. But politely declined Sir Barrow's request, stating plainly that he was simply tired of the Arctic.
This guy spent like 40 years of his life exploring just snow and ice and wilderness and nothing. And even though he was the most qualified person, they asked him to do it, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm good. I just seen enough snow. Sorry, tired of it."
Their next choice was Sir James Clark Ross, born 15 April 1800 in Finsbury Square, London. Sir Ross was an Arctic explorer if there ever was one. In his 50 years in the Royal Navy by the time of his death, Sir Ross had completed 6 Arctic and 1 Antarctic expedition. Prior to 1845, he had been the captain of HMS Erebus, one of the 2 vessels that was chosen to be used for this expedition. He used this vessel to explore and map large swaths of the Antarctic from 1839 to 1843. But when approached, he declined. The newly married captain told the Admiralty he had sworn to his wife he was done with the dangerous expeditions to the Arctic.
Okay.
Barrow's third choice...
All right, so there we go. The first 2 aren't there, so clearly Sir John Franklin is the third choice to be the leader of the expedition, right? Okay. Solon the Lich, member for 2 months of the Clean and Sober crew, says ship crashes, passenger and crew survive and are rescued before suffering greater calamities. Wisconsinites most affected. Not sure what exactly you're talking about there, but some incident perchance. All right, so on to the third choice to lead the expedition, Sir John Franklin. A distant third. Oops, where are we here? Yeah.
Choice was a young commander, James Fitzjames.
Wait, a minute. So our man, John Franklin, wasn't even the third choice? Commander James Fitzjames was.
A rather odd choice on the surface. Born 27 July 1813 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Fitzjames was only 31 years old when Barrow attempted to mark him as the captain of the expedition. But he was a remarkable young naval officer. Being of possibly illegitimate birth, He set out at a young age to make his mark. Joining the Navy at 12, he rose through the ranks quickly with great wit and daring bravado. During the Egyptian and Ottoman War, he boldly entered an enemy encampment at night alone to issue them a proclamation, bringing great risk upon himself. Later on during the First Opium War, he led an assault on the walled city of Zhangjiang, where he very nearly lost his life to a Chinese sharpshooter. A musket ball passing through his arm and into his chest stopped only against his spine.
Yikes.
He was known as a daring and brave officer, but it has been hypothesized that he did so to try and live beyond his illegitimate origins. It was during this time in Singapore that James met Sir George Barrow, John Barrow's oldest son. It's unclear what exactly occurred, but apparently Fitzjames paid off individuals to cover up a rather embarrassing event involving Sir George. Owing to this, John Barrow took great interest in Fitzjames' career and fast-tracked the young officer to many rank advancements and elevated positions. He was made captain of his own vessel at the age of only 29. But as much as the Admiralty would go along with any of Sir John Barrow's blatant favoritisms towards Fitzjames, they would not acquiesce with his appointment, stating he simply wasn't experienced enough for the job.
Okay, so we'll give guy number 3 credit. James Fitzjames, we'll give him credit for going, look, I'm still really young. I've been in Rio, I've been in China, I've been other places. And as if you notice they said the first Opium Wars. There's actually some really good books about the Opium Wars and how long it would take to declare war, which is kind of the problem, like why the Northwest Passage is such an important thing. With the Opium Wars, when you wanted to declare this war, you're off there in southeastern China, and people offend you. They don't do what you say, so you say, well, by God, we'll bring our military might to bear on you. So then you had to jump in a boat, sail all the way down the coast of Asia, all the way down the coast of Eastern Africa, down around Southern Africa, up the coast of Africa, around the western coast of Europe, and up to England. And then you had to report, this is what happened in China. We need a war. Then you have to spend your time and effort recruiting and raising your army, getting the Navy ready, getting the ships ready. You send some people to march all the way across Asia, Europe and Asia. I mean, literally march all the way across Europe and Asia. Then you send another group of people in the Navy ships back down around the coast of Europe, down the western coast of Africa, around the bottom of Africa, up the other coast and around and all the way around India and up Asia. And then you get to China and you go, all right, remember that thing you did about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago? Well, now the war is starting. That's how war is used to start. It would take 3, 4, or 5 years to actually get down to the fighting. So the Northwest Passage cuts a lot of that time off. You can just go straight across the Arctic and into the Pacific, and then straight on over to China. So yeah, that's why this was important for trade and war. So all right, number 3 guy, he recognizes that he's not up to handling this major task in the Arctic. So good for him. And that brings in our 4th choice, Sir John Franklin. Oh, wait, I think, did I flag that? Oh, yes. Okay. Drow says some popcorn with a doggy. And legendary racing, PSA, if you aren't a top 3 choice for the most dangerous expedition available, it's a hard pass. What about the crew that is being led by the 4th the 4th choice to lead the expedition? They may have to worry about it too. So anyway, on to the 4th guy. The 4th guy, Sir John Franklin.
The next obvious choice for the job was Captain Francis Rawdon Moira Crozier.
Wait a minute, time out again. Sir John Franklin isn't even choice number 4 for this expedition. That was Sir Francis Rawdon Moira Crozier. Yeah. Our fearless leader of the expedition was not even choice number 4.
Born of simple origins on the 17th of September 1796, he was born in Bainbridge, County Down in the Kingdom of Ireland. A good personal friend of Sir James Clark Ross, Captain Crozier was as much an Arctic man as he was. Having completed 6 Arctic and Antarctic expeditions in his 38 years in the Royal Navy, he was captain of HMS Terror during Captain Ross's last Antarctic expedition just 2 years before. Captain Crozier was built to lead this expedition. But there was a catch that saw the Admiralty not choosing him.
Oops.
He was Irish and of lower to middle class.
This is seriously some shit. As someone who is 1/4 Irish, I object to this treatment of the Irish. And for those of you that are Irish, this should really, not be a big surprise to you. Because the last 800 years and whatnot.
Upbringing. They're not choosing him.
They just don't want him because he's Irish.
He was Irish and of lower to middle class upbringing. The British didn't want the man who forged the link to make that final great journey to be an Irishman. So thus he was made second in command. So who would be first? Sir John Barrow's 5th choice, Sir John Franklin.
Woohoo!
Now, this isn't to say that Franklin was a poor captain in any right. At 59 years old, Captain John had 45 years of naval experience, having joined up at the age of 14. Born on April 16, 1786, to a well-to-do family, he was the only of his siblings to enter naval service. He rose through the ranks while participating in several wars, such as the French Revolutionary War, Napoleonic War, and the War of 1812. He also participated in 2 major Arctic expeditions, though prior to this, he was perhaps most famous for the 1819 copper mine expedition.
Which is the one we just talked about.
A tremendous failure of an expedition over northern Canada that resulted in the death of 11 out of 20 of his men. Most perished from starvation, and the few only survived by eating the leather from their boots.
And each other. Don't forget each other.
Franklin thusly was nicknamed the man who ate his own boots, a rather embarrassing black mark on his record. After this, he was appointed lieutenant governor to Van Diemen's Land, what would be known as modern-day Tasmania. But despite his few failings, he was known to his men as very kind and caring for their well-being. He was deeply religious and would often lead sermons for his crew and pray with them. This expedition was seen as an opportunity for Franklin to make up for past mistakes and leave a large name upon the map. So it was selected. Sir John Franklin would lead the overall expedition. His second in command would be Francis Crozier, captaining the HMS Terror, and finally James Fitzjames would be the commander of the HMS Erebus. The vessels selected for the expedition were the very best for the job. The Erebus was a Hecla-class bomb vessel.
Now, these ships are way cool. I mean, especially for the time. He's going to get into a lot of the details of these ships, but I mean, these are like seriously, these would be like spaceships. I mean, these are awesome.
Repurposed for Arctic expedition. Having been built in 1826 in Pembroke dockyards in Wales, she was 105 feet long and 29 feet at the beam. She was crewed by 67 sailors, and in her Navy days was armed with 2 heavy mortars and a complement of 8 24-pounder guns and 2 6-pounder guns. She was used almost exclusively for expeditions, though, participating in Ross's Antarctic expedition. Her sister ship was the HMS Terror, and was a good deal older and had more service. Commissioned in 1813 as a Vesuvius-class bomb vessel, she was a very similar size and armament. She participated in the War of 1812, even participating in the bombardment of Fort McHenry, the engagement in which Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. But in the 1830s, she was converted into an Arctic expedition vessel.
Yeah, and so put yourself in the position of these crewmen. They're crewmen. They're going on an expedition led by choice number 5 aboard a ship called the Terror. Doesn't exactly give you a high degree of confidence, or at least it wouldn't do so for me. Number 5 is in charge, and you're on a ship called the Terror. Let's see what happens.
That would perform the journey. The ships were retrofitted with the latest technology. They were outfitted with a locomotive steam engine connected to a brass screw, making them the first ships of the Royal Navy propelled by this method. They were 25 horsepower each and could move the ship along at 4 knots. On top of that, the brass screws were housed in a well that could allow it to be decoupled and pulled inside the hull to protect it from ice. The steam system was also piped through the ships in ducts, essentially creating some of the first central heating. A desalination process was used to provide fresh water for the crew. The ship's hull was heavily reinforced. Iron plates were fitted to the bow and waist to protect it from ice damage. The thickness of the hull was doubled, as well as having diagonal cross planks fitted for more structural integrity. The ships were essentially the space shuttles of their time, the latest and greatest technology with the sole purpose of Arctic expeditions. The ships were supplied for a 3-year journey. On board each ship were 2 tons of tobacco, 7,560 liters of liquor.
That sounds like my kind of expedition. Now, again, that seems like a lot, right? 2 tons of tobacco, over 500 liters of whiskey, but this is they had planned for a 3-year journey. That still seems like a lot to me. It still seems like a lot. But again, you have to plan a 3-year journey for 129 people.
2 tons of tobacco, 7,560 liters of liquor, and the ship's libraries were stocked with 1,200 books. But of the greatest advantages owed to new technology, each ship were stowed with 8,000 cans of preserved food. They had everything needed for a 3-year journey and could last up to 5 years with strict rationing. So, on the 19th of May, 1844.
Now, I want you, if you have the wherewithal, I want you to take notes note the dates these things happen. We'll talk about the dates as it goes on, but just to keep, like, if you want to, and if you want to play at home, make a little timeline of some of these events.
5. The 2 ships departed Greenhithe, Kent. They made a stop in Greenland and offloaded 5 men who had fallen too ill to continue the journey. They departed and were seen by European fishermen in Baffin Bay on the 28th of July, 1845.
Yeah, and see, can you imagine the humiliation of being those guys? You're on the greatest expedition that's been put together in the history of mankind to find the Northwest Passage, and you get sick, so they have to put you off the ship. You just can't go because you're just too sick. And then I'm thinking a little bit later, they were thinking, thank fuck I was sick. I'm alive.
This was the last time the expedition was seen by Europeans. Entering the Arctic, every single of the 129 men aboard Erebus and Terror perished.
Spoiler alert, they all died. Except for those lucky bastards that were too sick and couldn't be included in the voyage. Now that we all know that all 129 people died, let's listen to this horrific story as to how it all unfolded.
After 3 years and many requests by Lady Jane Franklin, John Franklin's wife, a search was launched. An investigation was started that wouldn't locate the ships for nearly 170 years.
That's true. That is honest to God true. It took nearly 170 years of searching to find those ships. And there's actually some really cool documentaries about finding the 2 ships and finding some of the bodies along the way. We'll talk about that more in detail the next time we do this with the retired afloat people.
Piecing together clues, we can put together an incomplete story of what might have happened to the expedition. The ships sailed until their first winter, where they found a protective cove near Beachy Island. They wintered here, pulling down the ship's top masts, putting up a canvas cover for the top decks, and shoveling snow against the sides of the ship to insulate them. Spirits were probably high during this first winter. They had made good speed, and all their reserves were high. They would busy themselves with hunting and possibly sports on the ice. Unfortunately, though, in that first winter, 3 men died. If you're sensitive to unsettling images.
Now, this upcoming group, talking about these 3 guys that died, there's an entire documentary about finding them, about finding these bodies.
Please skip ahead. I'll provide a timestamp for you to skip to. When the bodies were exhumed in the 80s, it was determined that the three men most likely died from tuberculosis. Their bodies would remain remarkably preserved for over a century. But soon the spring thaw released the ships, who continued onwards.
Now, I mean, they were just frozen perfectly in ice. And one of the men that died, they were shocked and surprised that when his body thawed out enough that they had already done an autopsy on his body. And they figured it was tuberculosis and perhaps lead poisoning, which they'll talk about a little bit later here. A boarding school story time. Welcome to the Clean and Sober, our newest member. Thank you so much. That is deeply, deeply appreciated. So yeah, I mean, it's really, really cool. Just if you just go to YouTube and search anything about the Franklin expedition, that's one of the videos that'll come up. It's something I can't remember the title off the top of my head. Otherwise, I'd tell you something about ice. But it's the search they did when they found these bodies and thawed them out and did testing and whatnot on them. It's pretty cool.
In 1846, they reached a sort of fork in the road. After passing down Peel Sound, they reached King William Inlet and were faced with a choice: head west over the inlet and hopefully get through the sound before winter, or head south on the hopes that King William Inlet was indeed King William Island. They didn't know that it was in fact an island, but they didn't want to risk it either. They headed west, right into a crossroads where several channels emptied into. They became stuck in pack ice off King William Island on the 12th of September, 1846, and readied for a winter on the ice.
This is their second year.
Would be their undoing.
The second year, they're just sort of stuck in the ice. And Legendary Racing says, how is it faster if you can't get through without freezing for a winter? Well, that's what they were trying to find out. And the answer is it wasn't. Clearly. So they haven't even gotten very far, and they're already in their second winter. And again, keep in mind, they only had enough food planned for 3 years, possibly 5 years, if rationed carefully.
Core samples of the ice later would show the winters of 1846 and on for a few years were the worst the Arctic had seen. The ice around King William would not thaw that summer. On the 28th of May in 1847, a sledge party was sent to shore on King William. They erected 2 cairns and left notes in each. The notes simply gave the ship's position, that Captain Franklin was commanding, and that it was all well.
And see, this is just so cool. This is what history has given us. And this is why I can't wait to talk more about it with the retired afloat people. Because they were expecting to sail that year, but the ice never thawed. And they're like, holy crap, we got to go across land. And some of these across land, the journey was amazing. They would have these ships that were literally tons and tons, you know, the lifeboats and the support. They were dragging them across the ice. They were dragging these ships across the ice. And there's another documentary dealing with this where they had some people from the Royal British Navy reenacting part of this expedition. And even though these people are hungry and starving, while they had the soldiers do the same waking times and working times and whatnot, and they managed to pull one of the ships 4 miles in one day, and they figured that they burnt 11,000 calories each trying to move these ships. So imagine people in the early 1800s already starving to death trying to move these ships along. I mean, it's just incredible what these people went through. But so, and it's all just because you happen to have your journey start out, and then you get hit by 3 or 4 years of the worst winters in history.
But things were only going to get worse from there.
And these are the actual cairns. They mentioned they put these cairns here, and thanks to journals and details and stories, the oral traditions from the Inuits and other people, they managed to find these cairns and the notes that were included in these notes saying, where people are, what happened, and like they were just talking about. So they've actually just retraced
all well. Steps. But things were only going to get worse from there. Just 2 weeks after this sledge expedition, Captain John Franklin died. The circumstances of his death remain yet unknown to this day.
He just died. Bye.
From 1847 to 1848, the winter kept the ships trapped, refusing to thaw even into spring. They were running low on food, and the situation looked dire.
3 years on.
After
and not
18
moving.
months in the pack ice, Captain Crozier, as acting commanding officer, made the decision to abandon ship and start walking out. On the 22nd of April, 1848, they abandoned ship, loaded their equipment onto sledges, and 104 men started to walk south across King William Island. Their goal was the Back River and a Canadian trading post, 800 miles away.
Yeah, can you imagine? They're going to walk and carry all of these supplies in the what's a cairn? It's not a cairn, it's a cairn. Cairn, cairn. It's a cairn of stones, cairn. Not a Karen, cairn. Karens are different. Karens are middle-aged wine moms with blonde hair and a bouffant hairdo. Karens are piles of rocks.
On the 25th of April, they reached the Cairns and amended their notes. It's as follows. HM ships Terror and Erebus were deserted on the 22nd of April, 5 leagues north-northwest of this. Having been beset since 12th September 1846, the
and this is a copy of one of the actual notes that was left at one of the cairns, or Karens, as some of you insist on calling them. Damn Karens. A cairn of stone. Just don't make fun of people. Cairns. So he's sort of saying Karens.
Officers and crew, consisting of 105 souls, under the command of Captain F.R.M. Crozier, landed here in latitude 69 degrees, 37 minutes, 42 seconds north, longitude 98 degrees, 41 minutes west.
And see, I like this here because it's written in several different languages. There's all the stuff that he just read, plus whoever finds this paper is requested to forward it to the Secretary of the Admiralty, London, with a note of the time and place at which it was found, or, if more convenient, to deliver it for that purpose to the British consul at the nearest port. Vices is being a Karen while explaining the difference. Nice. I'm not pronouncing it Karen. I'm pronouncing it Cairn.
This paper was found by Lieutenant Irving under the cairn supposed to have been built by Sir James Ross in 1831, 4 miles to the northward, where it had been deposited by the late Commander Gore in May-June 1847. Sir James Ross's pillar was not, however, been found, and the paper has been transferred to this position, which is that in which Sir John Ross' pillar was erected. Sir John Franklin died on the 11th June, 1847, and the total loss by deaths in the expedition has been to this date 9 officers and 15 men.
So they're good. They've only lost 23 people up to this point. That's pretty good. They've been there for over 3 years now. 3 years packed in the ice, and they've only lost 24 people. Good for them.
Signed, James Fitzjames, Captain, HMS Erebus. Not a soul survived the march south. Later autopsies of the found bodies and testimonies from the Inuit people painted a grim picture. The men were starving and malnourished. The canned preserves they had brought on board were rushed. The company was awarded its contract to can 13,000 preserves in just 7 weeks before the expedition was to set sail. The process was rushed in many instances. The lead solder used to seal the cans leaked into the food.
Yeah, oops. There's something I bet history would have really wish they'd been more careful and more knowledgeable about. The cans were soldered with lead. Lead poisoning. That explains the lead poisoning in one of the bodies. Plus, is it because this was a rush job, and rush jobs are never good? There was some other problems with the food. Not only was the lead from the solder leaking into the food, there's some problems with the food themselves. Now, I just want to welcome the 732 of you that are here now. I think this is a record for Maritime Monday. We keep setting records every week. Thank you so much for being here. I invite you to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you're here waiting for the trial of Zachariah Anderson, it'll be starting in 20 minutes. So we'll be shutting this down here in about 10 minutes. Then we'll all take a little break and that trial will start up. And that's kind of the midstream grift. Thank you for being here, everybody. I deeply appreciate it. We're glad to have you here for this story that is just starting to get really bad. You've tuned in at exactly the right time to hear just how bad the story gets. We've only lost 24 people so far. But now things go very, very wrong very, very quickly.
Contaminating it. The food at times was not adequately cooked through, leading to botulism.
It's not
the pipes that were used in the water.
It's not adequately cooked. And then it's stored in leaking lead. Oh yeah, and the water purification system, also lead.
Purification system were also lined with lead. And the lemon juice brought on board to fight scurvy likely had lost its potency by the 3rd year. The men set out pulling 8,000-pound sledges over ice and rock in freezing temperatures while weak from malnutrition and lead poisoning. Many slowly dying from scurvy. They planned to walk 800 miles, while every last one was slowly dying from the cold and from lack of proper food. When one man fell, they tossed him into the back of the boat, only increasing the burden of the others bit by bit, until finally they would be left in a tent with some food, left with the empty promise that they would return for them once civilization was reached. When the native Inuit were interviewed, they stated that they had observed portions of the group that had resorted to cannibalism.
Yeah. More wolf meat, I guess. But that's where they're dead. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about the law of the sea and whatnot being that if you're in an extreme situation, if you're in extremis and someone dies, you're essentially forgiven for eating them. What you can't do is hasten their death. You can't hasten the death so that you can have a meal. That's sort of the accepted law of cannibalism back around that time. You can eat somebody if you really need to. You just can't help them die. So, yep, cannibalism.
When this was reported back to the Admiralty, it was downright refused.
No.
The Inuits were labeled liars and savages, stating British men would never have resorted to cannibalism. Their stories would not be confirmed until the 1980s, when bodies were found and appeared to have cut marks on the bones.
Yeah, there was like some fillet marks, like someone had filleted the meat off the bones. And there's some better pictures in this that show seriously just like sliced fillet marks on a bone.
And scorches where it was apparent that bone marrow was attempted to be extracted.
Oops.
In 1850, the Inuits found an abandoned ship. After climbing aboard, they found a few lone men.
Okay, now I want you to think, this is where the story gets really freaking interesting. This is 5 years after the expedition started. 5 years. The Inuits find a ship.
In 1850, the Inuits found an abandoned ship. After climbing aboard, they found a few lone men dead in their bunks.
Okay, so nothing weird about that, is it? The expedition's been there for 5 years. It's been gone for 5 years, and there's some dead people in their bunks, right? Nothing weird about that. Or is there?
Ship. After climbing aboard, they found a few lone men dead in their bunks. A fire was still going on the stove.
A fire was still going in the stove. So these Inuits had found the ship 5 years after it sailed, and apparently the last one of them had died so recently that the fire was still going in the stove. So some people on that ship survived for 5 years, trapped in the ice on this ship. only to die moments before a potential rescue arrived. That is weird.
Leaving them to believe that the last man couldn't have died much longer before the Inuit people arrived. It was confirmed to have been either the Erebus or the Terror by the description of the smokestack by the witnesses. This leads researchers to believe that a few men might have returned to the ships or were left on them to tend to them as the majority marched south. At some time during 1850, just 40 men were spotted traveling south on.
All right, now five years later, fire's still burning. Oh God, how awful. Well, yeah, that is weird, but no, it's getting weirder now. Now is where the really weird shit starts to happen. This is where the weird stuff happens. So again, 5 years after they left, another group of 40 men are spotted walking south by some Inuits.
At some time during 1850, just 40 men were spotted traveling south on King William Island. By 1851, they spotted just 4 men.
A year later, so now 6 years later, another group of Inuits sees only 4 people walking. So, they lost everybody but 4 of them by that point. So we've lost 125 people at this point. 6 years after the accident, there's people still walking, trying to get out of the Arctic. They're different people, They didn't. But it gets worse and weirder.
South on King William Island. By 1851, they spotted just 4 men. At some point between 1852 and possibly 1858, the Inuit spotted Captain Crozier and 1 other man heading southwards.
Did you hear that? 12 years after the accident, Captain Crozier and another guy are still trying to get out of the Arctic ice.
Confirming his identity through photographs, this would have made Captain Crozier nearly 62 years old at this time, and meant that he had survived up to 12 years in the Arctic. But this would be the last sign of any member of the expedition. On the 31st of March, 1854, the Admiralty in England declared every member of the expedition deceased. After finding the 2 cairns, the graves on Beechey, and testimony of the Inuit people, the investigation remained largely stagnant until the autopsies in the 1980s. Then finally, in 2014, almost 170 years later, the wreck of HMS Erebus was discovered, sitting at the bottom of Wilmot and Crampton Bay in 36 feet of water. In less than ideal conditions, the ship had deteriorated quite a bit. But just 2 years later, the HMS Terror had been found in, oddly enough, Terror Bay. It was in remarkably preserved conditions. Initial dives have brought up a wealth of artifacts. Further investigation of the hull was set to be performed in 2020, but were put on hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The true extent of what occurred during the Franklin expedition will likely never be known, unless logs or diaries are found in the massive stretch of Canada's Arctic. Oddly enough, the final link of the Northwest Passage would be found while attempting to rescue Sir John Franklin. But the legacy and mystery of it are still alive today. What secrets that can be found in the Hull of Terror are yet to be seen? Perhaps someday soon, we may know just a bit more of what happened to those 129 intrepid sailors who set out into the great unknown and were never seen again. Thanks for checking out the video. If you're interested in learning a bit more about the Franklin's Lost Expedition, go ahead and check out the TV series The Terror on AMC. It's based on the Dan Simmons novel 2007 of the same name. The settings in the ships and all the uniforms are actually very historically accurate, and it paints a very good picture of the expedition. It changes a few things in the fact that it's not just the cold that killed them, but also a spooky monster. But if you're into sort of monster flicks, it's very good. The historical accuracy, besides the monster, is very interesting to watch. I'd also like to thank all of you. This channel has grown by leaps and bounds. I'm honestly surprised by how much it's grown so quickly. So thank you so much. If you did enjoy this and you want to help out the channel, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And stay tuned. I hope to have another episode out every Sunday. So thank you very much, shipmates, and fair winds and following seas to you.
Wow, okay. There we go. That is the initial story we're doing of the Franklin expedition. That's a pretty remarkable story. Now, the terror they were talking about that movie, the show, it was okay. The show was okay, but again, it did get into the weird supernatural monstery stuff. But if you like monster shows, watch the show. If you don't want to watch it, don't. I don't care. Yeah, so that's an interesting story, and it's crazy to think that some of these people may have been living with Inuits or living by themselves or traveling. But for me, the most striking part of this, Nicholas Darv says this time it wasn't the Vikings' fault. The most striking part is the Inuits finding a ship, one of the ships, with a fire still in the fireplace, in the stove. Yeah, don't be a Karen. All right, folks. That's it. That's the end of the show this week. And like I said, we're trying to arrange a schedule with the retired afloat couple so that one or both of them can come on the show and give us a more in-depth story. A good 2-hour discussion about the Franklin expedition and everything that went into it and the aftermath. It's a fascinating story to listen to, and there's so much written about it. There's so many videos, there's so many shows, TV series, documentaries, and whatnot about this expedition, which is one of the most expensive, which is one of the most famous expeditions in human history. And on that note, we're going to wrap it up today here because we've got about 8 minutes before my next stream kicks off, where we're going to be talking about and watching the State of Wisconsin versus Zachariah Anderson. 767 of you are here. Clearly the number one most watched Maritime Monday in Maritime Monday history. Thank you for being here. And we'll all be automatically forwarded over to the trial stream here as soon as I shut this down. But first, I wanted to welcome Blue Varo to the where are we at here? To the Clean and Sober crew, our new member, and Winter Steel, 5 to 12 years, and no one found any settlement or signs of life while roaming. We don't know. We don't know if they lived with Inuits or if they lived with other tribes or villages or Eskimos or whoever they found. We don't know if they were on their own. We just don't know. Like, unless there's some sort of diary or history or something else that comes to light, we may never know. Other than they were cited and verified with photographs. And XComer Triple Z, Jeff was on. Any chance you can go over the DNA in the van evidence at a downtime during trial stream? Seems to be what the couch wine moms cling to as proof of guilt. Yeah, we will talk about that on the appropriate stream coming up in about 6 minutes. So I'm going to shut this down now. We're thanking everyone for being here. We should get automatically forwarded over there. If it doesn't get forwarded to that stream, click on the little blue box up at the top of the chat here. If that doesn't work, then go find Legal Vices, my channel, and click on the Zachariah Anderson trial. Mods, thank you so much for being here for yet another Maritime Monday. And all of you that are here, thank you all for setting a record for Legal Vices Maritime Monday attendance. And on your way out, please hit that like button and please subscribe to the channel as we push forward to 36,000 subscribers and eventually on to 50,000. That's the goal. The like and subscribe poll will be shut down in 3, 2, 1. The end of the poll ended here with I smashed the like and subscribe button because 19% of you said a normal person. Your polls suck. Thank you for that losing. 38% of you said I smashed the like and subscribe button like a cannibal tenderizing meat. And in first place with 43% of the vote, I smashed the like and subscribe buttons like a ship crushed by the Arctic ice. Thank you, everybody. See you next week for another Maritime Monday. In the meantime, every night we'll be doing the Zachariah Anderson trial. On Thursday, we'll be doing O.J. Simpson. And that will take us through to whenever the heck this Zachariah Anderson trial ends. Take care. We'll see you all on the other side. Everybody, Legal Vices chat, you guys rock. All the new subscribers, all the new visitors, all the mods, everybody, and appreciate your generous donations to the super chats. Talk to you later. Lawrax out. Today's Captain Lawrax saying, "Arr." That was so stupid.